Good evening. This is Taylor Shockey with Progress with Chess. You know, now that I think about it, it could be morning or afternoon for you, but it's evening here. Anyways, this week's video, I thought we would do something a little different, and I'd like to show you a way that I've found is very effective in teaching the concept of check, checkmate, and stalemate to little kids, as well as the concept of castling. Now, these two lessons, the check and the castling lessons, would generally take place sometime apart. You know, normally you'd start with check and then castling would be down the road once everyone was good with how the pieces move. So I teach first through fourth graders at various schools in Cleveland, and I've been doing it for a number of years, and this is how I teach the concept of check, checkmate, and stalemate, and castling. So first thing is different people teach different ways, and just like there are different ways to live your life, there are different ways to teach, and certain styles don't work for everyone. So this happens to be my style. Adapt it, use it, see if it works for you. Anyways, let's dive right in. So first thing we're going to talk about, what is check? Well, here we have a position. It's black's turn. Check is if you are to move a piece and on the next turn, if the opponent didn't do something, so in this instance, the white king, the white team didn't do anything to get out of check, then on the next turn, black would be able to take the king. So check simply means, hey, your king is in danger, and if you don't do anything about it on the next turn, I'm going to kill it. But since this is a gentleman's game or a lady's game, you never actually kill the king, much like in modern combat, I would say. You don't kill the politicians. You capture them and use them to barter and hold for ransom. Same thing in chess. You don't actually kill the king. You just say, hey man, I could kill your king. You got to do something about it. So this is what check looks like. Notice the black queen could kill the king if white doesn't do something about it. Well, white can do something about it. And here's where the mnemonic comes in. Okay, it's useful. You know when Batman, well, you probably don't because you're probably younger, but back in the day when people actually read comics and there was a Batman cartoon, when he would punch the villain, right, the sound would come up as words. It would say bam or pow, you know, when he punched him, okay? So to remember the three ways you can get out of check, I want you to remember Batman punching the Joker right in the face and bam coming up, B-A-M, okay? So, B, you can block to get out of check. The white queen could move in between the black queen and the king, and now the white king is no longer in check because that piece is in the way. Pretty simple, right? All right, second thing, A. A stands for attack. Second way you can get out of check is you can attack the piece that's putting you in check. So if you were to attack the black queen and remove the threat, there's nothing to put him in check anymore. He's out of check. So that's the second way. The third way, M, is you can simply move out of check. If you recall, the black queen can move kind of in a star shape as far as she wants, right? So let's simply move to a square where we're not going to be bothered. So we move here. Notice black queen can no longer attack the king. So, bam, block, attack, or move. Those are your three options when you are in check. Now, the obvious next question is, well, what if I can't do any of those three things? And that brings us to our next concept, checkmate, or you losing. So this is what happens when you cannot block, attack, or move. So that's all checkmate is. You've heard that term before, I'm sure. But it simply is you're in check, but you can't get out of it. So your king is in danger of being taken on the next turn if you don't prevent it, and you can't prevent it, so you lose the game. So let's take a look at this position. Our white king is in check in multiple ways. Notice black queen can get him. Also, black rook can get in. Okay. Now, we do have our queen here still, but let's go through the steps and see what happens, okay? So, first thing to get out of check, we got to look for, can we block? Well, yeah, we can block one of the pieces. If we were to move our queen here, notice that we would be blocking the black queen. However, the black rook would still have us in check. And rule numero uno in chess is when you are in check, you must get out of check. You can't just choose to ignore it and hope the other opponent doesn't see. You must get out of check, okay? So keep that in mind. Also, you're never allowed to do anything to put yourself into check. Two important points that I probably should have mentioned earlier, but there you go. Okay, so we can't block because this black rook is now here and it still is threatening to take our king on the next turn. All right, can we attack? Well, yeah, we can. We could kill this queen or this rook with our queen. However, we can't kill both on the same turn. We would have to choose one or the other, and we would still be in check by either the rook or the queen. So let's say we decided to capture the queen. Well, the rook could still get us, so it wouldn't matter. Same thing if we were to take the rook, queen could still get us, okay? So we cannot attack to get out of check. Can we move? Well, let's see. The king, as you may recall, is kind of like a dinky version of the queen. Remember we showed the queen, she has like the big star pattern. Same sort of pattern, except you can only move one square. So one square in any direction. So really his three options are here, here, and here. And it's not looking good for him because our rooks could still get him if you move to any of these three squares. So moving is not an option either. And as we said before when we went to this lesson, this is what checkmate looks like. The king cannot get out of check, therefore he's in checkmate, and therefore white has lost the game. At this point, it's always a good idea to look your opponent in the eye, shake hands, say good game. And if they're feeling nice, maybe ask your opponent what you could have done better. You know, where was the point in the game at which they thought they had the edge? You'd be surprised. You can learn a lot from this. Losing is actually one of the best ways to learn. So lose often and lose gracefully. Okay, so the third concept is kind of a weird one, and you may have thought about it. I don't know, it may have come into your mind, what if? But what happens if you're not in check, but you can't move anywhere? Because remember, I said you're never allowed to do anything that puts your own king in check. So this is a situation like that. Notice it's white's turn. However, all three squares he could potentially move to would put him in check. And you're never allowed to put yourself in check. So what does white do? Well, this is a very sort of unique circumstance, and it's called stalemate. And easy to remember the term. Stale is something that has been left out. Imagine some bread being left out. It's stale, it's gross, it sucks. No one really likes stalemate unless you're losing. And so white, I'm sure, loves stalemate, but black probably doesn't. Stalemate is essentially a tie game in chess. It means no one's won, no one's really lost. That's what happens. So if you're losing a game of chess and there's really no hope of you winning, going for stalemate is a viable option. So in this instance, white can't move anywhere. It's white's turn, therefore it's stalemate. There are other ways stalemate can happen if you move the same piece back and forth a bunch of times. I believe that is dependent on what kind of tournament format you're playing in. But there you go. This is stalemate. So check, checkmate, and stalemate. Check, your king can be taken the next turn. Checkmate, your king can be taken the next turn, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. And stalemate, your king cannot be taken the next turn. Sorry, flicking off the camera. Your king cannot be taken the next turn, but you're not in check, and there's nowhere you can go. Okay, so as I said, I was going to be teaching sort of two blocks of things in this video. So this was the check, checkmate, stalemate block, and now we're going to move on to the castling block. Okay. So the reason I'm doing both of these things in the same video is, as I said, there is a link between them. So let's jump into castling. First off, what the heck is castling? Well, as I said before, I would teach castling after the kids had a pretty firm grasp of how all the pieces move, because if you introduce this too early, it really screws around with their heads, because it is one of the three sort of weird exceptions, along with pawn promotion and en passant. So, do this once everyone knows how to move. What is castling? Well, castling is an exception to the way the king normally moves. As we recall, the king normally moves one square in each direction. Okay? Dinky queen, remember? So this is an exception. Castling can happen either queen side, so the queen is usually here, or king side, the other side. And all it is the king decides he wants to move two squares to either his right or left, so let's move him right, and then the castle simply just goes on the other side of him. So if we were to castle king side, you'd move the king here, rook goes there. If we were to castle queen side, same thing. You move him two squares to the left, 1, 2, and then the rook would simply go on the other side of him, right next to him. Okay? And that's all there is to castling. And castling is an excellent thing to do because it puts your king in sort of a little defensive bunker over here. And I can't really remember the statistic off the top of my head, but a large portion of high-level games are won with castling. So statistically, it seems to be a very sound strategic choice. Okay, so that's castling. So why am I teaching castling and checkmate, and stalemate in the same video? And that is because of the link, and that is because of the acronym BAM. Remember Batman punching the Joker. So, what will prevent you from castling? Well, there are three things, and they are BAM, BAM. The first being if you are blocked. So here is a situation where there is nothing currently blocking on the king's side, okay? So if he wants to castle over here, sure, no problem. However, if he wants to castle queen side, notice big old queen is in the way, okay? You can't do it. So that's the first thing that will prevent you from castling. If there's something in the way, blocked, B. Second thing is A, attack. If your king is under attack, you cannot castle. Notice the queen here is putting our king in check. This king is under attack. As such, he can't castle out of check. That's a rule. You just can't do it. Gets a little weirder though, because not only can you not castle out of check, but you cannot castle into check. I mean, I guess it's not that weird because we already said you're never ever allowed to do anything to put yourself in check, and even if we were to block the queen with our knight, the king still couldn't really do that because we got our lovely little rook here. Okay, so remember, kingside castling, he would be moving 1, 2 to the right, and then the rook would be going here. So can't do it. The other thing that would prevent you from castling, so we're still under the A, we're still under attack, so you can't castle out of check, you can't castle into check. And here's kind of the weird one. You can't castle through check. Now, what does that mean? Well, here's what it is. Let's pretend it's black's turn. So he moves there. Now it's white's turn again. If the white king wanted to castle on the queen side, he could not because of this rook. Even though he is not moving to that square or moving from that square, remember when he castles, he goes 1, 2, and then the rook would go on that square. Even though neither of those two things would happen, still, we're imagining that he essentially walks through this square on his way here. And in the process, he would be temporarily putting himself in check. So, a little funky, but it makes sense if you think about it. Just imagine the fat old king, walking to his castle along the path. If there's something potentially dangerous there, you can't do it. So, the final thing that will prevent you from castling is if you've moved. So, if you've moved either your rook or your king at any point in the game, you can no longer castle. So let's see what this looks like. If we move our king here, black just decides to move back here because he knows we are demonstrating a principle. And then we decide to move our king back. We're like, oh shoot, no, I didn't mean to do that. and then we decide we want to castle the next turn, well, guess what? You can't. Even though you moved back to the original square, still can't do it. Same thing goes if you move your rook. So if you've moved your rook at any point during the game, so let's say you moved here, okay, black moves here for demonstration purposes, and we move our rook back, notice that we can no longer castle, okay, because we've moved our rook. Something to note is that even though you may be prevented from castling because you've moved one of your rooks, it doesn't mean that you still can't castle on the other side if you've not moved that rook. Okay, important concept. So simply moving one rook doesn't totally eliminate you from potentially castling. It's just you cannot castle on that side. If you move your king, however, you can't castle at all. Okay. There's one other thing I probably should have mentioned under the A, of BAM, and that is, remember, you can't castle out of check, into check, or through check, but your rook can be under attack. Notice this bishop is attacking this rook. That is not going to prevent the king from castling on the queen side, okay? So, something you should know, doesn't matter if your rook's under attack. I hope this has been helpful. I also hope that I wasn't too long-winded. This is kind of being recorded late at night, but thank you for joining me, and hopefully you know how to teach this concept now. And if you have any pointers or tips or questions or comments, please feel free to add a comment and share this video, and I appreciate it. Thank you.